Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this tea talk, or what we call coffee talk. I'm so sorry that we will not be providing you the tea or the coffee because this is a virtual tea and coffee talk. But do make yourself comfortable, with a cup of tea or coffee as we go through the topic of the new amendments in the Employment Act. Now, if you all can hear me, can you all just raise your hand so that I know that you all can hear me? Okay, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Charmaine. Okay, great. Okay, let's see how I can. Okay, great. And can you all see the slides? If you all can see the slides, can you raise your hand as well? Okay, thanks, Alice. So everyone can see the slide, right? Because I only saw Alice say yes. Anyone else? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide so that I know everyone. Okay, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Elsie. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Nurul. Okay, great. Now, just before I begin, how many of you are aware that we're going to have a new Employment Act? How many of you are aware that we're going to have a new Employment Act which will be amended and supposed to come into force on 1st September? If you're not aware, or this is the first time you're hearing it, then can you raise your hand so that I know, how many of you are aware and how many of you are not aware? So anyone who is not aware that we're going to have the new amendments to the Employment Act. Yes, the person who signed in as CIT said about time. Yes, true, about time, but also depends what they change, right? Changing the Employment Act is good, but also really depends what they change and how they change it. Okay, so no one is aware that so everyone is aware, right? That we're going to have this new Employment Act. Okay, great. So, okay, I believe majority of you is attending this this webinar because you most probably got a mailer, right, from us. And with the mailer, there is a newsletter. There is a newsletter that talked about the changes that is going to take place, right, in the Employment Act. Now, if you did not get the newsletter, right, because today I'm not really going to go through, I can just brief, at the end of the session today, I will briefly go through what are the changes. But today, because the newsletter already have all the changes in there, so I'm not going to really repeat them. Unless you didn't get the newsletter, then maybe you can just let Bernice know. Then she can actually send you a copy, right? But basically, my purpose today is to discuss how these amendments is going to affect you, okay? And what the government, where is the government now, or where is the Ministry of Human Resource now, in terms of the amendments, because all of us know that, the news announced that we're going to have this new Employment Act on September 1st, but after that announcement, it went silent, right? No, but none of us actually got news as in how it's implemented, what are the new amendments that's going to go live on 1st September, which ones are not, but they said they're going to actually pass a ministerial order. Yeah, okay, right? Okay. Just a bit of introduction, okay, right? Now, the Human Resource Minister in Malaysia, yes, another thing is I will appreciate if you could mute yourself during this session so that we don't get disturbance from your side while the rest are actually participating in this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute and of course not ask the question. But if you are too shy, because I know many are, then you can actually ask the question via chat. You can also send me a chat. Yeah. Okay. Then I'll try to answer your questions. Okay. Right. So if possible, if you could mute yourself, because I could hear just now, I could hear some background noises. Yeah. Okay. Right. So let's continue. So the Human Resource Minister in Malaysia has recently announced that the amendments to the Employment Act of 1955 will take effect as of 1st September 2022. And in order for this to take effect, the Ministry of Human Resources will be issuing an order, what they call a minister's order or ministerial order, to amend the first schedule of the Act. Now, the first schedule of the Act is very, very important because that determines which of your employees falls under the jurisdiction of the Employment Act and which of your employees are not covered by the Employment Act. So what is the first schedule of the Act? So currently, the Act under the first schedule actually provides protection for employees falling under the below categories. So I think most of you know that as long as your employees are earning not more than 2,000 ringgit a month, they are covered under the first schedule of the Employment Act. And if you have employees who are engaged in manual labor, regardless of what their salaries are, or maybe they are engaged in the operation or maintenance of mechanically propelled vehicles. So for example, your drivers and so on, right? They are also covered under the first schedule of the Act, regardless of their salary, right? Now, if you have employees who supervise or oversee other employees that are engaged in manual labor, then they are also covered under the first schedule of the Act. And any employees who are engaged in any capacity on a vessel. So of course, there are some terms and conditions for that. But if you meet the terms and conditions, then of course, your employees are also covered under the first schedule of the Act. And domestic servants are also protected by our current Employment Act under the first schedule. So, so this first schedule is actually very important because it actually determines whether your employees actually fall under the coverage of the current Employment Act or if they don't, right? So the Ministry of Human Resource have actually said that on 1st of September, they are going to amend the first schedule. Okay, and how they're going to amend it, they are going to pass a ministerial order. Now, but until today, we still do not know what are the I mean, we know that they are going to amend the Employment Act. We know what are they amending, but in terms of the first schedule, they have not actually made clear how is the first schedule being amended, right? Because are they going to increase the monthly salary, right, from 2,000 to maybe 5,000? You know, or are they going to take out the first schedule completely and ensure that the Employment Act covers everyone regardless of their salaries, right? So these have not been made clear to us yet. And that is important because we all have employees who fall under the Employment Act and some who don't, right? And of course, overtime is also affected because because all employees that fall under the first schedule of the Act are now entitled to overtime. So depending on how they amend the first schedule, right, overtime could also be affected, right? Maybe everyone is entitled to overtime, you know, or a certain salary level will be entitled to overtime. Yeah. Okay. Oops, sorry. So in accordance to the Ministry of Human Resources, because they are going to actually change the first schedule, they did say that they will be expanding the scope of the Principal Act by amending the first schedule, right? And they are going to do this through a ministerial order, okay? Right, and as I said earlier, if they amend the first schedule, we are all affected because either the number of employees that are covered under the first schedule now will increase if they increase the salary limit, or maybe everyone is covered. Yeah, so it actually remains to be seen whether such order will be issued to take effect on 1st September 2022, together with the amendments under the Amendment Act. So when our government or our Ministry of Human Resource announced that the amendments of the Employment Act will take effect on 1st September, right? They did not actually state that they will be passing the ministerial order on the 1st September, on 1st September as well, so that you know, all the acts, all the amendments will take effect. So that has not been clarified yet, right? So we will just have to wait and see, you know, what is their next step. Yeah. Okay. Now, which employees are affected by the amendments? Okay. Now, currently, the Employment Act of 1955, of course, with some exceptions, only applies to employees mentioned in the first schedule of the Act, which I explained just now. So typically, or basically, employees whose wages do not exceed 2,000 a month, and or employees who are involved in manual labor, you know, they're all covered under the first schedule of the Act, right? That's the current practice right now. Now, if you study our Employment Act, or if you're aware of our current Employment Act, we also have a section on maternity protection, right? And sexual harassment. Now, there are provisions for maternity protection and sexual harassment under the Act. And this is the only sections that applies to all employees, regardless of salary range. Which is why all female employees, regardless of how much they are earning, right, they all get maternity leave, and they all get to enjoy all the maternity benefits that are indicated in the maternity protection section of the Employment Act. Same with sexual harassment. Okay, there is a provision in the Act on sexual harassment. Regardless of the employee's salary, they are all covered under the Act, right? So currently, female employees and all employees are covered in terms of maternity protection and sexual harassment. And this actually covers all employees. It doesn't matter whether they're earning above 2,000 or below 2,000. Yeah. Now, however, when the Ministry of Human Resources passed the bill, right, to actually amend the current Employment Act, there was some confusion, okay, whether employees who are earning above 2,000 a month will still receive their maternity protection under the Act, or if the Act will be expanded to cover all employees, right? So that wasn't made clear when the bill was passed. So subsequently, what they did is they actually did clarify. Now, why was there a confusion? When the bill was passed, okay, at Parliament, or at our Dewan Rakyat, which is our Parliament, the Ministry of Human Resources actually deleted some section under the Act, right? And funny thing is that they deleted section 44A. And section 44A provides that maternity protection provisions that applies to all female employees, regardless of salary. And they also deleted section 81G. And that provides for the sexual harassment that applies to all employees, regardless of salary, right? So when they passed the bill, they said they are going to delete section 44A and section 81G. But they did not then further say what kind of amendments they are going to do to the first schedule, right? So they did not make any amendments to the first schedule. They just deleted section 44A and section 81G. So if I look at the bill right now, with Section 44A and Section 81G gone, right, without any amendments to the first schedule, what this means is that employees who are earning above 2,000 a month will no longer be entitled to maternity leave, or they will no longer be covered under the sexual harassment provisions, right? So that is a bit odd, okay? Because why would you not cover female employees, right, under the Maternity Protection Act, or even, you know, sexual harassment? Okay, so that was a bit odd. Okay, so that was the first reading in Dewan Rakyat, or in our parliament. You just excuse me, yeah. I have to drink quite a lot of liquid because I just recovered from COVID. So my throat is still a bit dry. Yeah? So I have to drink some liquid to keep it, you know, so that it doesn't dry out. Yeah. So when, as I said, when they deleted Section 44A and 81G, right, they did not talk about amendments in the first schedule. Okay, right. So that, of course, led to, you know, a lot of confusion, right? Nancy, you said grave oversight. Well, they actually caught it when the bill was presented for the second reading, right? So we had a second reading of the bill. And during the second reading, the Ministry of Human Resources assured that all employees, regardless of wages, will be afforded protection under the Act, subject to certain conditions. Okay, and they went on to say that the amendments to the first schedule will instead be done by way of a minister's order, rather than going through, you see, the normal way of passing a bill is they need to get the Senate approval. After the Senate approval, they have to go to our king, you know, our Agong, to get the royal assent approval. That's how a normal bill is passed. But it can be overwritten by the minister's order, right? So the Ministry of Human Resource then said that we will amend the first schedule through a minister's order. Okay, right? But funny thing is, they said they are going to, you know, go ahead with the Employment Act, the new Employment Act on 1st September. But until today, we are now towards the end of July. So until today, there are no details given about the minister's order. Okay, no details on what it contains and what are the conditions that will be imposed. So only at the second reading, they said, you know, don't worry, you know, all employees, regardless of their wages, they will get some protection under the Act, but of course we'll put some conditions. You know, we will amend the first schedule by the minister's order, but until today, no news. Okay, so we do not have details of the minister's order. We do not know what it contains, and we also do not know what are the conditions that they're going to impose for those employees that earn more than 2,000, or how they are going to change the first schedule of the Act. Okay, so are employees earning above 2,000 a month now entitled to maternity leave? Okay, so for now, all female employees are entitled to 60 days maternity leave, of course, subject to some terms and conditions in the Act. And this will continue to happen until the bill comes into force, right? Now, when I said the bill comes into force, the bill has to be passed by the minister's order, as what they proposed, right? So once it comes into force, then eligible female employees will now be entitled to 98 days of maternity leave. Okay, and this is supposed to take effect on 1st September. Okay, but again, there's no information on who are the eligible employees. Are they still going to allow every female employees to be covered, or are they going to say that those who are earning below 2,000, right, will be entitled 98 days? Those who are above 2,000, maybe they will still be entitled to Sorry, Ramli no Hafiza. Ramli no Hafiza, could you mute yourself because we could hear your conversation with your colleague? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, right. So, so at this point in time, although they said that all female employees will be entitled to 98 days maternity leave, they didn't actually specify whether this is applicable to only those that are covered under the first schedule, or it actually, eligible for all employees. So again, this has not been made clear. So we have to wait for the minister's order, right, to see what is the scope of eligibility. So the scope of eligibility will depend on the minister's order. So we are all still waiting for this minister's order. Yeah, okay. Now, if let's say the minister's order is not in force by the time the bill comes into effect. So let's say on 1st September, right, they didn't actually pass the minister's order, okay? They just say that the bill is in effect, but no minister's order has been passed. Then if you actually read the bill strictly, then women who are earning above 2,000 a month will not be entitled to any paid maternity leave until such time the minister's order is in force or until the act is further amended to say so, right? So that is why every one of us who are in HR is quite it's actually in anticipation. We are quite what we call very kanjong, okay, right? About this minister's order, we are a bit because now it's already July. Employers takes time to put new policies in place, right? Change employee handbooks and so on. But until now, we still haven't heard anything about the minister's order. So we are still not aware of whether it will be passed, the minister's order will be passed in time on 1st September, and whether the act will be amended accordingly, right? But if you just read the bill by itself now, right, because they have taken out Section 44A to protect the maternity protection for female employees. So if basically those who are earning above 2,000, will not be entitled to any paid maternity leave, right? But I believe the minister's order or some amendments will come in due course. It's just when, yeah, right? And for those of you who are familiar with our ministries, right? And implementation of certain things, so you should understand, how they work, yeah? Okay. Now, why a minister's order? Why does the first schedule of the act has to be amended through a minister's order? Now, the first schedule is a very important part of the act because the first schedule will help you to determine whether your employees are covered under the Employment Act or they are out of the scope of the Employment Act, right? Now, the approach of amending the first schedule through a minister's order has actually caused a lot of uncertainty, okay? Because they said they are going to amend through a minister's order, but no further details were provided. So, but then they deleted certain parts, certain sections of the act, right? So that has caused actually some uncertainty. But by not amending the first schedule through the bill itself, right? So that means what they're saying is that they are going to pass a minister's order to amend the first schedule. So they are not amending the first schedule through the bill that has been presented at Parliament or at Dewan Rakyat, right? So by not amending that through the bill itself, it also means that the expansion of the act was not debated before the Dewan Rakyat or Parliament, before the bill was passed. Okay, so basically, whatever expansion, because they said they're going to amend, through a minister's order. So basically, it's up to the Ministry of Human Resource to decide what they are going to amend, right? So whatever amendments that is going to take place through the minister's order was not actually debated before the Dewan Rakyat or the Parliament, right? Before the bill was passed. So at the end of the day, it is the decision of the Ministry of Human Resource to decide, what they are going to amend in the first schedule. Yeah. So, but until today, as I said, we have not heard anything about the minister's order. So without having sight of the minister's order, it is still very difficult now to assess which employees will be impacted and how. Okay, so until today, we're not sure whether those who are earning 2,000 will be impacted, or those who are earning above 2,000 will be impacted, or whether they're expanding the limit from the cap, the salary cap for those who are covered under the Employment Act from 2,000 to 4,000 or so on, because there were talks about increasing that to, some, if you have followed our Parliament or our Dewan Rakyat, some have actually debated that it should be increased to 5,000, due to the high standard of living that we have, the inflation and so on, so that we need to cover or protect more employees at a higher salary level, right? So that more employees will, will actually be able to earn more OT, right? But it still has not been confirmed. So it is difficult for us to now decide or assess, which employees are being impacted and how. Yeah. So we still need to wait. Yeah. Now, previously, when the salary capped for employees covered under the Act, right, was raised, or let's say they were proposed to be raised, it was usually reflected in the amendment of the bill, right? Because I think some of you who have been in HR long enough would remember that at one time, the capping was 1,005, yeah? And then it was increased to 2,000, yeah? And if you were in HR in the 1980s, right, you would remember that, we started at 750 ringgit a month. The capping in the first schedule, right, was 750 a month. Then it was increased to 1,000 a month in 1985. Then in 1989, it was increased from 1,000 a month to 1,250 a month. And then of course, subsequently now, we know it is capped at 2,000. Then in 2018, there was a proposal, okay, by the previous government to increase the range from 2,000 to 4,000. But that was not tabled before Dewan Rakyat or our Parliament, because after that we had a change of government and also COVID. Yeah, so that was not tabled. So that is why currently the salary capping under the first schedule is still 2,000, right? Now, since an amendment bill with other changes to the Act was already been tabled, so we know that they changed the maternity leave. We know they changed paternity leave. We know that they changed quite a number of things in the Employment Act, right? And that was all, they were all tabled, right? In Dewan Rakyat or in Parliament, right? And that is why they came up with the amendment bill. So it is actually very strange why the change of the first schedule, or why, if let's say they want to widen the type of employees or the salary cap, or increase the salary cap in the first schedule, right? Why wasn't that tabled together with the bill itself? So that is still very puzzling, until today. We HR consultants is still asking that question. It's like, if they change all the other changes in the Act, why not change or pass the first schedule amendments as well, right? Why do we need to go through a minister's order, which is the decision of the Ministry of Human Resource? So that is still puzzling at this point in time. Yeah. Okay. Oops. Okay. Now, if the Ministry of Human Resources is saying that the Employment Act will apply to all employees, okay, because they haven't decided yet. As they said, they will change the first schedule of the act. There will be some conditions imposed to ensure that all employees are protected, So if let's say the Ministry of Human Resource is saying that the Employment Act will apply to all employees, so does this apply to all rights and protection under the Employment Act? So does that mean everything under the Employment Act will apply to all employees across the board, regardless of their salaries or their wages? Yeah. Now, as the proposal to widen the scope of the Act, right, was not reflected in the bill. Okay, as I said, the first schedule, right, the amendment of the first schedule of the Act, which is to widen the scope of the Act, is not reflected in the bill. So again, we need to wait, for the content of the minister's order, right? Now, if the minister's order extends the coverage of the Act to all employees without limitation, then what this means is that it could result in some very wide-ranging consequences. So for example, highly paid C-suite officers, CEO, CFO, CTO, CHRO, and managers could statutorily now entitled to overtime, right? But I doubt it. Okay, I don't think that is the Dewan Rakyat's or Parliament's intention, which is why they said to wait for the minister's order. We will actually amend the first schedule of the Act, so it will have some terms and conditions in there. Okay, so very, very highly possible that the minister's order will include some limitation. So the only thing that we think may happen is they will actually increase the cap of 2,000. Okay, so but how much they increase the cap to, we are not sure yet. Okay, so if let's say they did take the suggestion in 2018 to increase it to 4,000, right? So what that means is that anyone who is earning below 4,000 will be covered under the Employment Act, and you will have to pay overtime for all these employees. Okay, right? If that happens, yeah. So again, without details on the minister's order, basically it remains to be a wait and see approach, right? I think, in Malaysia, everything is wait and see, yeah. Okay, so I think we are used to that kind of culture. We just wait and see what happens, yeah. Okay, so if let's say the amendments come into place on 1st September, right? So as an employee, can I ask that my employer give me 98 days of maternity leave now? Or as a company, should I give my employees 98 days of maternity leave? Yeah. Now, currently, at this point in time, as we're talking, there's no legal obligation to offer 98 days of maternity leave, right? The only time that this can come into force is when the bill comes into force. Now, whether the bill that is coming into force on 1st September 2022 will cover this maternity leave, we're not sure. Okay, because if you look at all the news or the newspaper that they were published, certain part of the amendments of the Employment Act will come effect on 1st September. They were actually concentrating on flexi work arrangement, right? Okay, FWA, right? They were actually looking at flexi work arrangement. There was no mention that whether 1st September the 98 days of maternity leave will also take effect on 1st September. Okay. However, many of us think that it will. So as employers, now we are now towards the end of July. Okay, we still got another month or so, right, before the amendments come into place. So as employers, I would suggest that you all start relooking at your maternity leave benefits and start preparing for the necessary changes, right? In anticipation of the change on 1st September 2022. Okay, so we believe that the 98 days of maternity leave will also be effective on 1st September, although the bill has not come into force yet, but we believe it will be because it's not difficult to just change from 60 to 98 days. So, you know, so some of you who has got policies in place, employment handbooks in place, and so on, right? So should actually start relooking at the maternity leave benefits, unless you have already done so, because I know there are a lot of private sectors out there who have already changed the maternity leave. I think most private sector changed to 90 days, like, you know, Maybank and all that, they have actually changed to 90 days. Initially 90 days was proposed. In the first reading of the bill, 90 days was proposed. In the second reading of the bill at Parliament, 98 days was approved. Okay, now why 98 days? 98 days is in line with the ILO, the International Labour Organization. Now, International Labour Organization is an organization that gives a benchmark of what benefits should be or what coverage should be given to employees on an international level. So our ministry and our government thinks that we should be on par with the ILO, right? So that is why they actually increased the or they agreed to actually increase the maternity leave to 98 consecutive days, yeah, which will most probably take place on 1st September. So if you have any employees who are currently pregnant and will be giving birth after 1st September, then all these employees will most likely be entitled to 98 days of maternity leave. So I think it will be good to start planning, you know, their work and who is actually going to be you know, taking over their job while they are on maternity leave. And this 98 days of maternity leave is paid maternity leave, yeah? Okay, right. Now, so that is maternity under the Maternity Protection Act, right? Now, we'll talk about sexual harassment, okay? Because that is another section that they actually deleted from the act when they passed the bill, yeah? So there are employment discrimination provisions in the bill. So we know that when they actually amended the bill, or you know, they upgraded the bill, what they call it, right? They actually did provide for employment discrimination, right? But can an employer get in trouble for placing racist job advertisements? I think some of you have seen advertisements, you know, in JobStreet, you know, I don't know, in Job Store or whatever that you use, right? Sometimes you'll see advertisements that says, you know, Chinese speaking employee only, right? Or Chinese preferred, female preferred, male preferred, right? Or things like only those who are below 45 is eligible, something like that. You know, all this very discriminatory and racist kind of job advertisement, right? So with the change in the employment discrimination provisions in the bill, so will employers now get in trouble for placing such ads or such advertisements?
Racist.
Sorry, is there a question? Okay, sorry, Alice, I just saw a question now. What happens if employee starts maternity leave before September 1st, say 13 August? Will she be eligible for 98 days or 60 days? Alice, it will be 60 days because she started the maternity leave before the change took place. So she will still be entitled to 60 days. Only those that start maternity leave on 1st September or after 1st September, they will be eligible for 98 days. Yeah, but again, Alice, we need to wait for the minister's order okay, to decide what are the terms and conditions for this maternity leave or maternity protection act, right? Because they did say that they are going to be putting in some terms and conditions. So again, we need to study that when it comes in place before we can actually decide. But as far as we're concerned now, 98 days is only applicable to those who start their maternity leave on or after September 1st. Does that answer your question, Alice? Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. Right, so talking about employment discrimination provisions, right? Now, in the provisions that was given in the bill when it was amended, right, unfortunately, the employment discrimination provisions only cover discrimination in employment, disputes between an employer and employee. So that means the employee must have already started work with the company and the employee felt discriminated, or the employee felt that maybe the supervisor is not promoting her or him because, you know, of his or her color, okay, right? Or gender, right? Not promoting him or her because she's female, you know, or not promoting him or her because she is above 45 years old or 50 years old and so on, right? So the employment discrimination provisions is only applicable when there is an employer-employee relationship, right? Now, for job advertisements, when you place an ad, there is no employer and employee relationship yet, right? So it's only between a job seeker and an employer, right? So basically, the bill, the amendment in the bill does not actually apply to protect job seekers from discrimination. So as a job seeker, if I see an advertisement, right, that says only Chinese preferred, or only female preferred, or only Bumiputra preferred, or, you know, and so on, right? It actually, the job seeker doesn't have a case, right, as of now, right? He cannot say that, hey, you know, I want to file a complaint because this company actually plays a very racist or discriminatory job advertisements, right? Currently, what has been changed in the bill actually did not provide for this. It's only providing for employment discrimination after the employee has joined the company, right? So it's actually talking about discrimination in terms of promotion, in terms of age, in terms of color, in terms of race, in terms of gender, after the employee started work. Yeah, okay. Now, all of you know that when our Ministry of Human Resources, when the Ministry of Human Resources actually announced that you know, that the amendments of the Employment Act will take place on 1st September, the thing that they emphasized was the FWA, flexible working arrangements. Now, this was made very clear in the news. I think in all the newspapers, it was made very clear about this FWA, right? So can I demand that my employer grant me flexible working arrangements? Okay, so effective 1st September, we know this one is definitely going to take place. This one's confirmed it's going to take place, right? So under the bill, effective 1st September, an employee can actually make an application for flexible working arrangements. Okay, now what is flexible working arrangement? Flexible location, flexible working hours, okay, and flexible location, flexible working hours, right? And flexible, basically flexible days, right? So that means an employee can make an application to say that I want to work from home on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Okay, or I only want to, and I will only work from, I need to leave early on Friday, you know, or I want to actually work at my hometown, and and so on. Yeah. Okay, that's a question. Okay, Kavita asked, can an employee apply for FWA that is not in company's existing FWA policy? Yes. Kavita, effective 1st September, right? Whatever company policies that you have is obsolete. Okay. All employees, can actually now apply for FWA in accordance to the Amendment in the Employment Act. Okay. But again, it is no legal obligation for employers to grant this request. So it doesn't mean that any employee who comes and apply for FWA, you have to say yes. Okay, so there's no legal obligation, right, on the employer to grant this request. Now, the only obligation on the employer, right, is to approve or refuse the application within 60 days, right? Okay, so that means if an employee comes to you and say, I want to apply for FWA, right? As an employer, you can approve or you can refuse, right? And you have to actually write to the employee in writing why you refuse. Okay, so if let's say you said no, right, then the employer has to provide grounds for refusal, and you are given 60 days to give the reason to your employee in writing. Okay, now then there are a lot of people said, my company, I'm doing retail. Okay, of course I need my people to be at the shop, to sell things, right? I can't have my people working from home. What are they going to, they can't sell things if they're working at home. Or you have a warehouse, you have warehouse executive or store or store executive, they have to be at the warehouse, to do the picking, and the checking of stocks and so on. They cannot be working from home. How are they going to check stocks and all that if they're working from home, or arrange for delivery and so on, right? So again, the ministry said all employees can make application for FWA, but we have to wait for the minister's order to see what are terms and conditions that's provided in there, if any, on the types of employees that can actually apply for the FWA. So again, we need to wait for the minister's order to see whether what kind of terms and conditions are there for the application of this FWA, because I think it is, I think all of you will agree it is quite silly if it's applicable to every employees across the board, because some jobs you cannot actually work from home, right? Because you need to be at the workplace to carry out the job. So that was not made clear when the ministry announced this granting of flexible working arrangements that will be taking effect on 1st September. So again, we will need to wait for the minister's order to look at the actual terms and conditions for this, right? But if you are in the service industry, or if you are in an industry where FWA is possible, right, then of course your employees then has the right to apply for this FWA, but you as the employer has no legal obligation to approve. And if you refuse, you have to tell them in writing, right, why you rejected within 60 days. Yeah. Okay. Because I know for a fact that Elon Musk is not going to be approving this. Okay. Right. I don't think Elon Musk will be very happy with our Ministry of Human Resource, okay, for making this, an option. Yeah. Okay. Now, how do the presumptions of employment under the bill protect me? Okay. Are they applicable to gig workers? Now, now many of our Malaysians, are gig workers. You know, I think you all know what gig workers are. You know, your Grab drivers, your delivery boys, you know, your Lala Move, right? Your your Ninja Van, your Shopee delivery, you know. Okay, those are gig workers, you know. Your Grab drivers, your Air Asia ride drivers, and so on, right? These are all gig workers. So basically, gig workers are workers that are not technically employed under an employer. So they are, it's something like a freelance, but then they're attached to an organization, you know, that give them jobs, yeah, if they choose to do that job, yeah, okay. So the bill actually states that if certain factors are present, then this will be the presumption of an employment relationship, even though you do not have a written contract. So without a written contract, as long as it's clear that there is an employer-employee relationship, then you will still, as an employee, you will still fall under the Employment Act, under the changes of the bill, depending on the minister's orders, terms and conditions. Okay. Now, if you are an employer, right, hiring an employee, even though you do not have a written contract, but the relationship is an employer-employee relationship, then of course, as an employer, you will also have to abide by the amendments in the Employment Act under the bill that has been passed and in accordance to the terms and conditions in the minister's order that's coming. Yeah. Now, what are some of the presumptions of an employment relationship? Basically, where his work or working hours, right, or hours of work is subject to the control and direction of another person. So meaning the employer actually tells you your working hours is from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or 10 to 7 and so on. So there is actually a set working hours, right? And where the person is being given tools, resources, right? Laptops, computers, materials, equipment by another person to execute the work. Okay. Or where the person's work actually constitute as an integral part of another person's business. So that means you hire this person and this person is it actually plays an important part in the company's business, right? Or the person's work is performed solely for the benefit of another person. That means this person is gaining or profiteering from this employment. Okay, right? And where payment, of course, is made to him in return for work done at regular intervals, and such payment constitutes the majority of his income. So if you pay someone a monthly pay, right, or you pay someone at a regular interval, right, when the person actually works for you, and that income is actually the employee's major income, right? So all these factors, if all these factors are present, okay, with the person that you have hired, okay, then this person will constitute as an employee in your organization, even though you do not have a written contract, right? It's either through verbal, verbal or written, in whether it's expressed or implied, okay, right? So it will constitute as an employee relationship, right? So, and if people falls under these conditions, right, then these people will be protected under the Employment Act and the new bill that has been passed, subject to the terms and conditions of the minister's order. Okay. Now, of course, the drafting of this, the provisions in the bill leaves much to be desired, since this section could be interpreted in a variety of ways. Because gig workers, as I mentioned, you know, it is actually quite possible that gig workers could end up being assumed as employees. You know, because gig workers is actually working, you know, within a certain hours, right? Gig workers is also earning from, let's say, your Uber or your Grab, you know, or your Lala Move and so on, right? So So gig workers could actually also be assumed as employees, even though it would not have been the intention of both parties at the time of the arrangement is made, because all Grab drivers, all Uber drivers, all delivery boys, right, or delivery ladies, right, when they become a gig workers, right, it was not the intention that, you know, that they are going to be employees, because they have that flexibility. But again, currently, our effective 1st September, our Ministry of Human Resource said that we have to give FWA to everyone, right? So gig workers is also working on a flexible work arrangement. So does that mean that they are also employees, right? Yeah. At this point in time, no, right? Because if they are, it actually goes against the position of the authorities, such as SOCSO, okay? Because SOCSO if you go to the SOCSO website, it is actually made very clear that you know, SOCSO claims that gig workers are self-employed. Okay, they are not employees; they're self-employed, and they are actually covered under their own contribution fund. So that means if the gig workers wants to contribute SOCSO, right, they actually contribute through a different contribution fund. So they do not pay the same rates as employees, yeah, right? Or they do not contribute the same as employees or employers, right? And our government themselves, you know, has been saying that we need regulation, separate regulation, separate legislation or new legislation to regulate these gig workers. So since the government has been saying that, you know, gig workers will be regulated under different or new legislation, so obviously they are not employees of the organization. Yeah, even though sometimes when you look at these factors, you know, it seems like the gig workers, you know, also sort of fall under these factors. But as long, you know, but gig workers as of now are not employees. Yeah. Okay. Right. So, but if let's say you have you know, companies that rely very heavily on gig work, right, instead of a full-time workforce, you know, like those like Lalamove, you know, like Grab and Uber, you know, or you know, Food Panda, you know, all this, right? They basically rely very heavily on gig works, right? Instead of hiring full-time you know, workforce, right? So depending on the interpretation, it may create complications for these companies, because the Labor Office may come in to do an audit, and they may want you to define, you know, how do you define gig workers and how you define your full-time employees, you know. So there could be some complications. So you need to make it very clear who are your gig workers and who are your permanent employees. Yeah. Okay. Now, as the implementation and effective date of the amendments are just around the corner, which is September 1st, okay? So as I suggest earlier, employers are strongly encouraged to revisit their employment governance, in particular your employee handbooks, employment contracts, to ensure compliance with the much awaited amendments, as what you know, one of our participants today, CIT, actually said, you know, it's about time. Yes, it is about time, right? Our Employment Act is old, 1955, even before we actually gained independence. Of course, there were some changes in between, but we really need an overhaul and a revamp of our Employment Act. And hopefully, once the minister's order comes in, you know, we will see that happen, and that it will actually protect both employers and employees. Yeah. Okay. But for now, you know, start looking at the changes. Okay. Right. Nancy said before we were born. Wow, Nancy. Now, Nancy, we know how young you are. Yes. Yes. Definitely before we were born. Yes, that's why it is actually really due for an overhaul. Yeah. Okay. Right. So so we should actually start looking, okay, right, to see what are the changes that we need to make in our employee handbook. Yeah. Okay. Or our contracts and governance to ensure compliance. Okay. Now, some of you would have got my newsletter or our newsletter that actually spells out all the changes that's going to take place. But I will just go through very briefly for those who actually did not actually receive our newsletter. Oops. So those who did not receive our newsletter, you can just actually ask Bernice, or maybe give your email. Let Bernice know who you are. I think Bernice have your email, and then she will be able to send one to you. But just very briefly going through this before we end, right? Now, these are all the changes that have been passed in the Employment Amendment Bill of 2021. Of course, they're all subject to terms and conditions in the minister's order that is in the pipeline coming soon. Okay, right? So let's just very briefly go through apprenticeship. Okay, can you all see the slide? Is it too small? Let's see if I can.
Not moving.
Yeah, it's not moving. It's not moving. I just want to make sure that it's not too small. Can you all see it? Okay, is it much better? Because so that we can all. Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. So one of the changes is apprenticeship. So currently under the Act, an apprentice contract is actually defined as a written contract for a period of not less than 2 years. So if you're hiring an apprentice, right, your apprenticeship contract cannot be more than 2 years, right? Now with the amendment, okay, it will now limit the duration of the apprentice contract to 24 months with a minimum of 6 months. So if you're going to have an apprenticeship contract, it has to be for at least 6 months, up to 24 months. Yeah. Okay. So that is a minimum, that's a minimum duration now. Okay. Right. Okay. Now, of course, it is debatable, right? Who is an apprentice? Okay. Right. So an apprentice basically refers to someone who you have hired, right, to train for a particular trade, right? Right. And the trade is actually not defined. Actually, the word trade is actually not defined under the Employment Act, right? But it actually refers trade, profession, and business all separately. So implying that they're all different. So again, the apprentice in the first schedule of the Act are referred to in the same category as manual labor, which suggests that this is only applicable for those learning a craft or trade rather than those undergoing a professional training. So again, we need to wait for the minister's order to see what the terms and conditions imposed to define what is apprentice, right? Or whether they will actually define what's apprentice. Wait, hang on. Oh, you're still seeing the amendment. Okay, hang on. Let me see what happened. Oops, I thought it would change. Wait, give me a minute. Can you all see it now? Okay. Can you all see it now? Can you all see the news? Can you all see the slide with the word apprenticeship on it?
Yes, but we can.
Yeah. Okay, right. Prasad, management trainees are not apprentice. Just to answer your question, Prasad, management trainees are not apprentice. Apprentice is like, for now, in the first schedule of the Act, it actually says apprentice are categorized in the same category as manual labor. So say, for example, you know, those garage or repair shop, you know, those car repair shop or aircon repair shop, you know, you will have this guy that will bring along this junior, right? And this junior is following this senior to learn the trade of fixing your car or fixing the aircon. You know, those are apprentices. Okay, that means they are being hired so that they can be trained for a certain trade or skill. Okay, right? So that is an apprentice. Nancy, are you still seeing a freeze screen?
No, it's okay now.
Okay, good. Okay, right. Okay, so that is apprentice, right? Okay, so now is actually minimum. I mean, once it comes onto first September, then it will be minimum. Graduate trainees are also not apprentice. Those are practical. Interns are also not apprentice. These are all internship programs, graduate program, management trainee. They are all not apprentice. As I mentioned, apprentice is someone that is learning a particular trade or skill. Okay, right? Okay, I hope Sharini and Catherine answered that question. Okay, now another change that is going to take place is the calculation of wages for incomplete month of work. Okay, let's see. Okay, right. Now, currently, under the Employment Act, if you want to calculate wages for incomplete month of work, if you're running payroll, right, you will know that you will have to divide by the number of days in a calendar month, right? So if you have 31 days in July, you divide by 31 days. If you have 30 days in June, you divide by 30 days, right? Now, they have actually passed a change for the calculation of wages for incomplete month. Right, so the new formula, right, for those who did not work a complete month. So when we talk about an employee that has not completed a whole month of service, that means he or she may most likely commence employment after the first day of the month, or he or she actually was resigned or terminated before the end of the month. All right, or maybe he or she took unpaid leave or leave to comply with written laws relating to national service and so on. Yeah. Okay, so question. Pat, are you going to share your slides with the participants? Only on the request purpose. I'm not going to share with everyone. If you want the slides, then you need to let Bernice know. Then I will share. You know, but we will most likely be putting this presentation on our YouTube channel, so you can actually you know, go to once the link is available, then you can actually go to the YouTube channel as well to recap what I've shared today as well. Yeah, because because today's session is recorded, so you know, you can also go to our YouTube channel again to recap. Okay, right. So the amended formula now will be monthly wages divide by the number of days in a particular wage period, okay, times the number of days eligible in the wage period, okay, right? So this is the amended formula, okay? Now, of course, this will most probably clear the air as to whether employers should use, you know, some of you say, why sometimes I use 31 days, sometimes I use 30 days, sometimes I use 26 days, you know, it's like, you know, sometimes this, sometimes. So now they have cleared the air, right? Whether you should use 26 days to determine a day's wage, you know. But again, when they came up with this formula, right, there was no further explanation on what do you mean by number of days in the particular wage period. Okay, right? So they did not actually define the number of days in a particular wage period after they amended this formula. Currently, number of days in a particular wage period is 26 days. Okay, right? Because we only because that is in accordance to Employment Act. So are we now changing the incomplete month of service to 26 days in comparison to 30 or 31 days in terms of calendar, or is it the actual working days, depending on whether you work 5 days a week or 6 days a week and so on? So that has not been defined yet. Yeah, okay, so we have to wait for that. Now, contractor for labor, basically a contractor for labor who supply any employee to a principal. So for example, your contract staff. So some of you may hire contract staff from people like Manpower, you know, people from Adecco, you know, this kind of agents, you know, the manpower agents, agencies that provide you with contract staff. So these are contractor for labor. So they provide you, you know, contract staff. right? So anyone, any contractor for labor who supply any employees to a principal contractor or subcontractor must now enter into a contract of writing with the recipient of the employee services. Okay, and such contract now must be made available for inspection by the Director General of the Labour Office. Because previously, when you sign a contract with Kelly Services or sign a contract with Manpower or Adecco, right, it is actually a business contract, okay, between you as the company and the agent, right? So it's nothing to do with Labour Office. But now, what they say is, it now falls under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Human Resource. So such contract now must be made available for inspection if, let's say, the Labour Office comes and audit you. Okay, so failure to make such documents available for inspection is an offence upon conviction, and you may be liable to a fine not exceeding 50,000. Yeah. Okay. So same thing. If, let's say, you do not hire contract staff through an agent, you hire directly. Like maybe I just hire someone. You become my subcontractor. I just subcontract this job to you, right? But it's all verbal and there's no written contract, then it's also illegal. So now anything that is a subcontract work, a contract for labor work must have a contract in writing and be available for the Labour Office to do any inspection. If not, there'll be 50,000 fine. Okay. So pregnancy and maternity protection, I think we spoke about that earlier. We know that it's going to be changed from 60 consecutive days to 98 consecutive days, as recommended by the ILO, International Labour Organization, right? Other changes that's going to take place under this maternity protection once it comes into place. But again, we're not sure what kind of females are eligible. I mean, in terms of salary range, so we have to wait for the minister's order for that. But for those females that are affected, the female now, with the consent of the employer, can actually start work anytime during the maternity leave. If, let's say, she is certified fit to resume work by a registered medical practitioner, right? Regardless of whether she's entitled to maternity pay. Previously, if an employee who has gone for maternity leave, right, is not entitled to any maternity pay, she can actually come back to work anytime. But now it is open to all female employees, regardless of whether they get paid or not. Because I believe they also recognize that 98 days is actually quite a long, it's more than 3 months. Yeah. So maybe some female employees, after 1 month, of looking after the baby, they're dying to come back to work. Okay, right? So they can. Okay, so they can, as long as they are certified fit to come back to work. So then an employer can actually allow them to come back to work, even though the female employee has not completed the 98 days of maternity leave. Okay, now another change is that when a female employee is pregnant or is suffering from an illness arising out of a pregnancy, you cannot terminate her, okay? Or you cannot give her notice of termination, right? Except she has breached her contract of service, she has done a misconduct, or maybe the company's business closed down, okay? Right, I have some question. Hang on. If an employee returns within 60 days during the maternity leave, is she entitled to maternity allowance till 98 days as well? No. Prasad, it will be because your maternity allowance is basically your maternity pay, which is what you are paying, the employee when she goes on maternity leave. Currently, even with 60 days, when a female employee goes on maternity leave, you are also paying her monthly salary as maternity allowance. The maternity allowance is her monthly salary, so there's no change, right?
Pat, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, actually, I've obtained different views on this because some consultants out there, they were mentioning that maternity allowance is for the duration of the maternity leave, which is 98 days lah, right?
Mhm.
So they are able to enjoy the maternity allowance for 98 days.
Hmm.
And when they come back, just say after 60 days and they start working,
Hmm.
they are being paid the salary, and at the same time, because the maternity allowance is given for the entire duration, which is 98
Mhm.
days, they
Mhm.
also get that. So in
Okay.
fact, even MECA and MEF also confirm. So there are conflicting opinions from different
Okay.
people. So I just wanted to have your opinion on
Okay, right. If the employee is not a monthly paid employee, then yes. So if you have employees who are daily paid employees, that means you pay them a daily maternity allowance. Okay, then yes, you will have to pay them the maternity allowance as well as their salary. But if your employee is currently earning a monthly salary, like for example, a monthly paid salary, right? They are being paid monthly, then your maternity allowance, right, and your monthly salary or monthly wages is the same. In fact, there is a section in the Employment Act that clearly says this, unless they change that in the minister's order. Right? I can actually, I don't have my Employment Act now, but I can actually give you that section. That it actually says that any employees who are being paid on a monthly rated basis are assumed to be receiving their maternity allowance. Their maternity allowance is treated as their monthly their monthly salary that you're already paying them. There is a section in the Employment Act that actually clearly states that, right? The only time you have to pay maternity allowance on top of the maternity pay is when they are daily rated employees, where they are being paid the maternity allowance on a daily basis, right? So unless unless the minister's order is going to amend this, right? But in the current Employment Act, that is what it says. So again, this falls under the Maternity Protection Act. So they have taken out the entire maternity protection section. I believe they are going to change something in there. So we'll have to wait for the minister's order to see whether this will change because of the increase in the maternity leave, right? But for now, in accordance to the current act, right, 60, the maternity pay is equivalent to the maternity allowance is equivalent to the monthly salary that they get paid. Yeah. Okay, does that answer your question, Prasad?
Well, I think I'm still not very clear, Pat. Does it mean the salary who returned to work earlier before the maternity period ended, they will get allowance, double the
this is what
salary?
Prasad and Kavita is asking, right? Whether if let's say maternity leave is 98 days, they come back to work after 60 days. So that means what they are saying is that they will get a separate maternity pay, maternity allowance for the whole 98 days. But on top of that, they will still get their monthly salary because they came back to work. Right? So that's what Kavita is asking. And that's what Prasad is saying as well. Right? Currently, the current Employment Act says they are the same thing if they are a monthly rated employee. Right? But as I said, the ministry has actually deleted the entire section 44A of the Maternity Protection Act. So they are going to make changes in there. So we will need to wait for the minister's order to see whether what Prasad and Kavita mentioned is going to come true, meaning that they will, if let's say the female employee said, I want to come back to work after 60 days, right? Then you have to pay 60 days of monthly salary, and on top of that, 98 days of maternity allowance. Because if that happens,
sorry, not to argue but just let's debate. I think the current provisions in terms of the maternity, the reason why, like what you say, maternity allowance and salary is treated together is because employees are not allowed to come back earlier,
Yes.
you know, right? So
Yes.
that's the reason why the allowance and the
Yes.
salary is treated as one.
That's
But
right.
when it comes to the amendment, it is now different, whereby employees can come back to work
Yes.
earlier, provided they are certified
to work.
fit lah, you
Yes,
know.
that's right.
And it is not upon the request of the employer. Most of the
Yes.
time, it is based on the request of the employee lah.
That's
So
right.
based on that argument, the basis is if the company allows the employee is certified fit,
Mhm.
she is able to enjoy both. That
Yeah.
is the argument out there
Yes.
lah. You see?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm aware of this argument. In fact, because the current Employment Act actually says that only those who are not paid a maternity allowance are the only ones that can actually seek consent from their employer to come back to work. Right? The current Employment Act says that those who are not paid a maternity allowance can ask to come back to work earlier so that they can get paid. Okay, because there are some female employees who are not eligible for maternity allowance, maybe because they have given birth to more than 5 children, you know, and so on, because they don't meet the terms and conditions of getting paid the maternity allowance. So in the current Employment Act, yes, for these employees, when they come back, then of course they will get paid. I know where you are coming from, Prasad and Kavita, and I know that this argument is out there, but many employers, right, are also not very happy with this if this happens, because if that's the case, most of my clients actually told me that if that's the case, I will not allow the employee to come back to work. Okay, because that means I have to pay them double, right, for that period that they come back to work. So I'll just let them finish their maternity leave of 98 days, right? But then again, the employee will say, no, you know, I do want to come back to work, you know, but maybe the employees want to come back to work because they know they are going to be getting salary plus maternity allowance, right? So again, as you said, it's debatable. At this point in time, there's no decision made yet. So again, we need to see what is the final amendment or what the minister's order states in terms of terms and conditions for these for female employees with regards to this. Yeah. So yeah, I'm aware there is a debate out there. Of course, it's at the advantage of the employee, right? But not at the advantage of the employer. Okay, right? But of course, if the employer feels that I'm short-handed, I really need this employee to come back, and if she's fit enough to come back to work, you know, and the employer is willing to pay the salary for her coming back as well as the maternity allowance up to 98 days, right? Then yeah, of course, you know, but as has not been confirmed yet, right? Whether this is the case, so we will need to get the actual terms and conditions under the maternity the new Maternity Protection Act, if there's any, right? Before we can decide whether this comes true or not, because employers are not very happy, and just like everything in Malaysia, the ministries, any ministry, will come up with some new amendments and changes, and then employers, MEF, employers, businesses, associations, so on, will debate and give their opinions, and then changes takes place after that. Yeah. So yeah, Prasad, I know where you're coming from. I also understand that is what many people are sharing out there as well. But we will need to wait for the actual amendments to come out, right, before we know whether this is actually the case. Yeah, most likely it will be the case, as you said. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Is that okay, Prasad? Yep. Okay, great. Yeah, so Kavita, does that answer your question as well? Currently, what you said, employee will be getting salary plus maternity allowance. That seems to be the understanding out there. But as I mentioned, we will have to wait for the minister's order you know, before we see the thing. But as employers, you know, do be prepared that you will need to pay additional if let's say your employer, if let's say you want your employee to come back to work without completing the 98 days of paternity leave. But again, current Employment Act doesn't say that, but yeah, again, you know, they took out the entire section 44A. So so that most likely is going to have, there's going to be major changes in the Maternity Protection Act. If not, they wouldn't be taking out the whole section, you know, to relook at it. Yeah. Okay. Now another change that they are going to be doing is when a female employee is pregnant or is suffering from an illness arising from her pregnancy, you cannot terminate her, right? Unless it's a willful breach of the condition of a contract of service, or she did a misconduct, or maybe the company closed down. I mean, that is the easiest lah. Okay. Now, so the burden now of proving that the termination is not on grounds of pregnancy or illness arising out of pregnancy will rest on the employer. So if let's say your female employee right now is pregnant, she cannot come to work on time because she has morning sickness, she's vomiting, you know, her guts out, you know, and it is affecting her work, right? You can't terminate her because that is not a misconduct, that is not a breach of her condition of her contract of service, because she's suffering from an illness arising out of her pregnancy, or she's suffering because of her pregnancy, unless you have very, very strong justification, you know, to justify that it is not her performance, her non-performance is not because of her pregnancy. Unless you can really justify that, if not, you cannot dismiss this pregnant employee. Okay, right? But again, when they actually came up with this amendment, right, they did not actually elaborate or define what illness arising out of a pregnancy is, right? So there was no further explanation as in whether the illness is limited to certain, you know, certain kind of illnesses or what. So again, you know, we need to, or does it extend to mental health disorder arising out of pregnancy, for say, because some female employees do get, you know, depression when they undergo some pregnancy, you know, so does that covers that as well? So we'll have to wait again, you know, for that to come out in detail. Nancy, you said, how about probation employees? Actually, for probation employees, they are entitled to, if they're pregnant, right, they will be covered under this as well. So you cannot terminate probationary employee if they're pregnant and their non-performance is due to their pregnancy. Okay, that means it's not due to their work, you know, their misconduct at work, but it is due to their pregnancy that they can't perform, they're sick, you know, or they're taking MC all the time because the pregnancy has complication, you know. Yes, it also covers probationary employees as well. But as I said, so far they did not actually define, you know, what illness arising out of a pregnancy is. Extend probation, it most probably will be difficult for you to extend the probation unless you can prove that her performance is not related to her pregnancy. If you can justify and you're very sure that her performance is not related to her pregnancy, then yes, of course you can extend her probation. Yeah, but again, there's a risk because she may most probably she may file a complaint to the labor office to say that she's pregnant and she wasn't performing due to her illness or her complication. So there may be a case against you. So unless you're very, very sure that it is not related to her pregnancy. Okay, right? So as I mentioned, we need to wait for the minister's order to see what are the changes, because it has not been confirmed you know, because the Section 44A has actually been abolished, right? And Section 44A actually, you know, extends maternity protection to all females, right? Regardless of whether they fall under the first schedule. So of the act. So again, we will need to wait for the minister's order if it happens to see what are the terms and conditions provided for female employees under the Maternity Protection Act or the new Maternity Protection Act if they have one. Yeah. Something new. I think all of you most probably have heard paternity leave. Okay, so it's now compulsory to give your married male employees to 7 consecutive days of paid maternity leave, paternity leave. So if their wife gives birth, then of course, all married male employees are entitled to 7 consecutive days of paid maternity leave, but it's only up to 5 confinements. Doesn't matter how many spouses they have. They can have 4 spouses. You know, as we know, some Muslims employees can have 4 spouses. So, you know, they can have 4 spouses as long as, you know, they have given birth. Among the 4 spouses, they have given birth to 5 children, right? You know, they're only entitled to that 7 consecutive days up to 5 deliveries, yeah, or confinements. Yeah. Okay. So it's not 5 confinements per spouse. Okay, it's irrespective of the number of spouses. Okay, right. And another term and condition is that for male employees to be entitled to 7 consecutive days of paid paternity leave, they have to be employed by the same employer for at least 12 months before the commencement of such paternity leave, right? And of course, if their wife is going to be giving birth, they have to let the employer know at least 30 days before the expected delivery date of the wife, yeah, so that he can start applying his paternity leave 30 days before the birth, yeah. But again, it is not stated clearly when the male employee can start his paternity leave, right? So currently we assumed it can only start when the wife starts confinement, right? Because for maternity leave, female employees can actually start as early as 14 days before the expected delivery date, yeah. But for male employees, it wasn't made clear whether they can start earlier. But so we assume that it can only start on the date of confinement. But again, we will see in the minister's order whether this is made clear in the upcoming minister's order. Yeah. Working hours has been reduced. Okay, currently under the Employment Act, our working hours are 48 days. Once the amendments come in, our working hours is now being reduced to 45 hours. So which means anything above 45 hours is subject to OT, if they fall under the coverage of the Employment Act. Yeah. Okay. Now, other things are employment of foreign employees. So prior approval now from the Director General of the Labour Office must be obtained for an employer to employ foreign employees. So you must get approval from the Labour Office. If you do not do that, then it will be an offence, and on conviction, the employer will be liable to a fine of up to 100,000 ringgit or imprisonment for a term of not exceeding 5 years or both. Currently, the Act only requires the employer to furnish the Director General with particulars of the foreign employees within 14 days of their employment. But now it requires approval from the Labour Office. Okay. Flexible work arrangement. I spoke about that earlier, so I'm not going to go through that. Yes, I have a question here. Is this applicable? Is this application for expatriate as well, or only for labor category? For now, it's labor category. Okay, for now it's labor category because laborers are now that falls on, because laborers are covered under the Employment Act under the first schedule. Okay, right? Foreign laborers are covered under the first schedule of the Employment Act. Expats who are earning more than 2,000 are not. But as I mentioned, they are changing the first schedule of the Employment Act. So if they change the first schedule to increase the salary capping to a range where the expat salary reaches the expat salary, then most likely you also have to report that. Yeah, but for now, no. Yeah. So again, we need to look at the changes in the first schedule, okay, to see which employees are now covered under the first schedule, right, to decide whether expats are required. But I doubt it. I doubt it. Okay, I doubt it because most expats will definitely be earning at least 10 to 15K, right? If we are going to be changing the first schedule to cover employees up to 10 to 15K, then we'll be paying overtime to, to all employees who are earning 10 to 15K. And that seems a bit far-fetched for now. Yeah. Okay. Does that answer your question, Kavita? Okay. Right. So flexible work arrangement, I've spoke about that earlier. Discrimination, I've also spoke about that earlier. Okay. Right. So again, this discrimination, is an employer-employee relationship, as I mentioned. So again, you need to comply. If you do not comply and you are, upon conviction, you may be liable to a fine of not exceeding 50,000. And if you continue to discriminate your employee even after, the first non-compliance, right, continuous offense, you will be liable to a daily fine of not exceeding 1,000 each day. Let's say the offense continues after the conviction. This is for the discrimination. Right? Okay. Sexual harassment. Now, they took out the entire Section 81G, as I mentioned, on sexual harassment. So we have to wait now whether sexual harassment covers everyone or only certain number of people. So we have to wait for the amendment or the minister's order to come in to see what are the new terms and conditions for sexual harassment. But for now, if let's say your employees do fall under the Sexual Harassment Act, then the fine has now been increased from 10,000 to 50,000. If let's say an employee actually files a complaint on sexual harassment and is found to be justifiable, then the employer may be fined up to 50,000. Yeah. Okay. Court order for payment due to employees. Additional powers to the court has been provided. Okay, where an employer has been convicted of an offense where payments are due to an employee under the Employment Act. Okay, so if let's say you owe employee salaries or wages, right? That means you hold employee salary or wages, or you do not pay the employee salary or wages or any payment that is due to employee, right? Then that's an offense. So if you fail to comply, then the court may issue a warrant to levy the employer's property for such payment by way of distress and sale of property, or by way of a fine provided under the Criminal Procedure Code. Right now, this is of course applicable to those employers who are suffering from financial difficulty. So maybe they cannot pay employee salary and they hold, right? So the employee go and file a complaint. So basically now they can actually issue a warrant to levy the employer's property, right? Okay, and impose a fine. Okay, if you fail to pay the employee, so a court order could be taken against you. Other than that, there's now a general penalty under the Act. Okay, so because every time we have clients that come and ask us, what is the fine? If I didn't comply with this, or if I didn't comply with that, or I forgot to, all this while I never pay OT. So now I'm going to start to pay OT. So if Labour Office come and audit, what is the fine? What is the penalty? Okay. So now they have actually put a general penalty under the Act. Okay. Right. It has been increased from 10,000 to 50,000. Okay. Previously, it was up to 10,000. Okay. Depending on your conviction. right? If they find that you're guilty of certain omission or certain things that you did not follow the Employment Act, right? It was 10,000 before, maximum of 10,000. Now they've increased that to 50,000. Yeah. Again, I think I mentioned about this, who is an employee and who is an employer. We talk about that, including the gig workers. So I'm not going to go through this. Jurisdiction of Director General of the Labour Office, right? Currently, the Director General of the Labour Office may only inquire into complaints between employees and employer, provided that the employee's wages do not exceed 5,000 ringgit. But Section 69B to 69E of the Act relating to the powers of the Director General of the Labour Office has been deleted actually, right? So with this, the salary cap of 5,000, where the employees were eligible to bring dispute before the Director General, is now lifted. So this is actually in line with the Ministry's intention to extend the scope of the Act, right? But it will actually have an opposite effect of actually limiting the Director General's jurisdiction to dispute. Again, we need to look at the amendments in the first schedule of the Act to see you know, what level of employees or what kind of employees will be covered, so that they fall under the jurisdiction of the Director General of the Labour Office. Yeah. Okay, currently is up to 5,000, but they have actually taken that out now. So does that mean all employees, regardless of wages, is now under the jurisdiction of the Director General of the Labour Office? Or is there a capping, an increased capping, or maybe types of employees? So again, we need to look at the changes that's going to be made in the first schedule of the Act that should be coming soon. They have now defined domestic employees to a more politically correct terminology. As all of you know, domestic workers or domestic employees currently are covered under the Employment Act. You know, and in the Employment Act, they talk about domestic servants. Okay, they use the term domestic servants. They have taken that out now. They are now referring domestic servants as domestic employees. Okay, right? So the Amendment Act of 2022 will actually introduce significant changes to the Employment Act. Okay, right? So so domestic servants have they just, I guess they just didn't want you know, servants. I don't know, maybe the word servants doesn't sound good, you know, so and they are also, servants are also considered as employees. So I guess now they decided to politically correct the terminology to domestic employees, right? So basically, so these are the changes that are going to be taking place in the Employment Act. Okay, so it will, all these changes will fall under the Employment Amendment Act of 2022. So there are significant changes. Okay, but at this point in time, we are still waiting for the change in the first schedule of the Act, which is very important because that will determine what kind of employees are affected. And what kind of employees are going to be covered in the new Employment Act, and also all the terms and conditions relating to the changes, right? So whether the ministerial order will take place effective or issued to take effect on 1st September, yet to be seen. We have not heard anything, so we will wait and see. Okay. But I suggest all employers to start reviewing their Employment Act, taking into all these changes into consideration. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that is all from me today. Okay. Any questions? Any questions so far? Okay, any questions? Yes, Sharini, no problem. Going back to amendment of working hours from 48 to 45, we have staff who work from Mondays to Saturday, full day, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So with the new amendment of 48, do we need to pay OT for them starting on Saturday half day? Actually, the right way is to revise your working hours. Okay. You cannot actually still fix their working hours 8 to 5 for 48 hours. You will need to amend your working hours on Saturday so that the whole week is only 45 hours, right? And then any additional would be overtime. So you cannot actually just leave it as it is and said, okay, you know, anything, the additional 3 hours, I'll pay OT. You can't do that. You will need to amend your employment contract, not employment, your employee handbook or whatever. You must change your working hours from 48 to 45 hours. Some companies may want to take away Saturdays and maybe increase on weekdays, you know, and so on. But you have to change your working hours from 48 to 45 hours in all your employment, employee handbook and so on. But if you still wish for them to work the additional 3 hours on Saturday, then you have to consider it as overtime. But you cannot still say that working hours is full day 8 to 5, but I pay you OT for the 3 hours. You can't do that. Do you get me, Sharini? Okay. Okay, any other questions? There's still a lot of uncertainties. If you do alternate Saturdays, no problem. As long as your working hours for the week does not exceed 45 hours. Okay, you can do alternate Saturdays, no problem. The most important is that does not exceed 45 hours. So in your handbook or whatever, it must say that your working hours must change to 45 hours, then any additional hours will be paid overtime. Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, still a lot of uncertainties. We know what the changes are. Okay, that's going to happen, but how they are implemented, how they're going to be executed, what are the terms and conditions, you know, who are affected, what category of employees are affected, those are still uncertain. We will have to wait and see what the ministerial order that is going to be passed says, and what are the changes in the first schedule of the act that takes place, and what are the new, if there's any new section for maternity protection and sexual harassment that is going to replace the previous section. You know, all these you know, we'll have to wait and see, you know, what happens. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Betty, any suggestion on how we should amend our work schedule if our staff is on shift? Betty, can we take that offline with Bernice? Yeah. Okay, because I know you're, you know, can we take that offline? Because yours is we'll need to work that out with you separately. Yeah. Yeah. We take that out. We take that up offline with Bernice. Any questions? Any other questions? General questions? No? No questions? Excuse me. Okay, so thank you very much. Is there a question? Okay, thanks, Nancy. Actually, Nancy, nice to see you online. Yeah. Okay. So that's all from us. We have some social media channels. Do follow us, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel. Okay. because we do update, all the amendments and legislations or whatever through our Facebook. For our existing clients, who are here, I know there are a few of you here today. All the existing clients knows that we do send out separate emails to you on any changes, right, or amendments. So we are still waiting for the minister order to be passed to get the actual changes in the terms and condition. But for all other participants here today, just join our social media, and then the updates will be there from time to time. Yeah. Then currently there's also some changes in SOCSO, which we have already shared in our social media, right? Some changes for SOCSO for those who are earning above 5,000. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prasad. Okay, something different from the normal sharing out there. Yeah, I think a lot of the sharing out there just tells you basically, what are the changes and all that. But yeah, I wanted to do something different. Wanted to see how it's going to affect you and what the ministry is currently doing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Sunita. Kim. Okay. Yeah, and Kavita. I would like to have the presentation slide and summary amendments. Appreciate if you could email me. Yeah, Kavita, Bernice, can you take note of that? We will email Kavita the presentation slide and the newsletter.
All right, sure.
Yeah. Okay, you have her email, Bernice?
Yes, I have
Okay.
Kavita's email.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yep, thank you very much. Just now my
Thanks,
slide,
Hope. Yep.
also have my email address. So if you want to take down my email address, you can take it down. And then if you have any questions, you can email me. I will try to answer them the best possible way I can. Okay. Thank you, Noraini. Thank you, Phoebe. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll see you hopefully in the next quarter. We have this every quarter, different topics, different sessions. Okay, so hopefully we'll see you in the next quarter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and keep well, Pat.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Pat.
stay safe,
Thanks
everyone.
all.
Yeah, stay safe because the virus now is more aggressive than ever.
Bye-bye.
Spreading faster now.
Bye.
Okay, bye.